The snow came early that year, cruel and colorless, burying the trail outside Hollow Creek in silence. By the time the posse thundered through the frozen pines, the outlaw was barely breathing. Reed Callahan, once a name that made sheriffs curse and saloon girls whisper, was nothing more than a bleeding shadow slumped across a horse's saddle. His shirt was torn where a bullet had punched through. The man who rode beside him, a nervous farmer who'd found him collapsed near the tracks, looked half ashamed to bring him in alive. When they reached the small frontier clinic on Main Street, a crowd had already gathered. Hollow Creek was the kind of place that measured morality by survival, and there wasn't much sympathy to spare for a train robber. "Don't you drag him in here," someone shouted. "He's got more blood on his hands than that floor can hold." But the farmer ignored them. Dismounting and shouting for help, Dr. Nathan Graves appeared in the doorway, white coat buttoned, spectacles fogged from the cold. Behind him stood his daughter, Evelyn, apron tied over her blue dress, her hands still red from scrubbing instruments. She froze at the sight. One man half dead, another trembling, and a whole town thirsting for justice. "Doctor," the farmer pleaded. "He's still breathing. I couldn't just leave him to freeze." Dr. Graves looked down at the outlaw sprawled on the porch. "That man's a wanted criminal. The law will be here soon enough. I won't risk my clinic or my daughter for scum who made his choices." He started to turn away, but Evelyn stepped forward. "Father, he's dying." "And rightly so," the doctor replied, cold as the wind that swept between them. The outlaw stirred, a low sound rising from his chest, a ragged, human sound that didn't belong to legend or sin. Evelyn dropped to her knees beside him, pressing 2 fingers to his neck. A faint pulse fluttered beneath her touch. "He's still fighting," she whispered. "We can't just—" Dr. Graves's voice cut her off. "Evelyn, inside now." But the townsfolk were watching, men with rifles, women clutching shawls, eyes sharp with judgment. Evelyn felt every gaze burn against her, waiting to see what she'd do. "I won't let him die on the doorstep," she said quietly. "Not while I can help." Before her father could stop her, she gripped the outlaw's arm and tried to haul him inside. He was heavy, too heavy, but something in her refused to let go. 2 young orderlies rushed forward, exchanging uneasy looks with the doctor. "Bring him in," Graves barked finally, though his jaw tightened like a trap. "But understand me, Evelyn, this isn't mercy. It's a procedure. He dies under my roof. It's clean and quick. Nothing more." They laid Reed Callahan on the examination table. His breath came shallow and broken, his face pale beneath days of grime and stubble. Blood soaked the linen beneath him faster than Evelyn could press her hands to it. "Bullet went clean through," Dr. Graves muttered, cutting open the torn shirt. "He's lost too much. He won't see morning." But Evelyn barely heard him. She caught sight of something glinting against his chest, a locket smeared with dried blood. She reached to remove it, but his hand twitched and caught hers with surprising strength. For a heartbeat, their eyes met. His eyes were fever-bright, the color of storm clouds over dust. "Don't take it," he rasped. "It's hers." Then he went limp again. Evelyn's throat tightened. Whoever hers was, this man still clung to her even on death's edge. Outside, voices murmured through the frosted windows. "Should have left him out there," someone growled. "Evil doesn't deserve a doctor's hands." Dr. Graves turned to his daughter. "You'll assist, then you'll rest. And you'll remember, compassion is wasted on men who chose their fate." Evelyn looked back at Reed's face. Despite the grime and ruin, there was something defiant beneath it, a life that refused to surrender. She drew a breath, steadying her hands over the wound. "No life," she said softly, as he's beyond saving. The doctor frowned but didn't argue. He stitched and cleaned, working through the night while the lamps hissed and the snow fell harder outside. When dawn broke over Hollow Creek, the outlaw still breathed. Barely, but he breathed, and though she didn't yet understand why, Evelyn Graves knew the choice she made that night would change everything. The first thing Reed Callahan remembered was the smell of carbolic and smoke. Then came the pain, sharp, white hot like fire licking through his ribs. He tried to move, but something tugged tight across his chest. "Easy," a soft voice murmured. "You're safe here, safe." The word sounded like a cruel joke. His eyes opened to the dim lamplight of a clinic room. Shelves lined with jars and tinctures glinted in the glow. His vision swam until it settled on the woman seated beside him. Brown hair tied back, eyes the color of soft river water. "Where am I?" He croaked. "Hollow Creek," she said gently. "You were shot. We almost lost you." He gave a low, bitter laugh that turned into a cough. "Would have been easier if you had." Evelyn ignored the words, lifting a tin cup to his lips. He drank, wincing at the effort. "Your name's Reed Callahan, isn't it?" The question stiffened him. He turned away. "Don't matter who I am." "It matters to the law," she said quietly. "Marshal Boone rode through last night. Folks are saying you robbed a train." "I didn't rob it," Reed muttered, eyes closing. "Just rode with the wrong men." Evelyn studied him. The calloused hands, the scars, the exhaustion that seemed older than his years. She'd seen dying men before, but none who carried regret like a shackle. "Then maybe," she said softly, "you've still got a chance to make something right." He turned his head toward her voice, eyes narrowing. "You don't know me, girl. Don't waste your mercy." But she didn't look away. "Mercy isn't wasted," she said. "Not if it keeps someone breathing." For a long time, neither spoke. The snow outside melted into slow, dripping quiet. Then, as she rose to check the bandages, something slipped from beneath his blanket, a small, tarnished locket. It dangled open, catching the light. Inside was a woman's picture, her smile faint beneath scratches and blood. On the back, scratched into the metal with a knife's point, were 5 words. "I'll come back for her." Evelyn's breath caught. "Who is she?" Reed's hand shot out weakly, closing around the locket. "No one you need to know." But there was something desperate in his grip, as though that small piece of metal was the only thing anchoring him to life. When she stepped outside, her father was waiting, arms folded. "He's awake?" "Yes, weak, but..." Dr. Graves cut her off. "You'll stay away from him once he's stable. The marshal will want him alive, and I won't have you tangled in his sins." Evelyn's gaze hardened. "He's not a sinner, Father. He's a man who made his living spilling others' blood," the doctor snapped. "The world's full of broken causes, Evelyn. Don't add another to your list." But that night, long after the lamps dimmed, she returned to Reed's bedside. He lay restless, sweat beading on his brow. When she pressed a cool cloth to his skin, his eyes fluttered open. "You again?" he murmured. "I told you," she said. "I don't give up easily." He gave a faint, rueful smile. "That makes one of us." She hesitated, then said softly, "The locket, you said it's hers." "The woman in the picture, who is she to you?" His jaw worked, but he didn't answer right away. Then in a voice rough with shame, he said, "My sister, Annie. I left her with a promise I ain't kept. She's out there somewhere, with the men I used to ride with." Evelyn swallowed. "And you mean to keep that promise?" His eyes darkened. "I mean to die trying." Something inside her trembled at those words, not fear, but understanding. This wasn't just an outlaw clinging to pride. It was a man chained to something sacred. When she turned to go, he said quietly, "You should have let me die out there." Evelyn paused at the door, the lamplight tracing the outline of her face. "Maybe," she said. But then who'd keep that promise? The door closed softly behind her. And for the first time since the gunfire on the tracks, Reed Callahan felt something he hadn't in years, hope. It was faint as breath, but it burned like life, free. Days passed before the sound of hoofbeats shattered the uneasy calm of Hollow Creek. Evelyn heard them first. A distant thunder that grew louder until the whole town seemed to hold its breath. When the riders appeared at the edge of Main Street, there was no mistaking the star glinting on the lead man's vest. Marshal Boone. He was built like the frontier itself, weathered, lean, his gray eyes taking in everything and forgiving nothing. Behind him rode 2 deputies in a wagon with iron bars. They pulled up outside the clinic as the townsfolk gathered again, whispers swirling like dry leaves. Evelyn stood at the doorway, her apron still streaked with iodine. Boone tipped his hat to her politely before stepping inside. "Morning, Miss Graves. Heard tell you've got one of mine laid up in here. Reed Callahan, wanted for train robbery and murder." Dr. Graves met him in the hall, stiff-backed and formal. "He's here, Marshal. Barely alive when he came in. My daughter insisted on treating him." Boone's gaze flicked toward Evelyn, then back to the doctor. "That's so. Well, once he's healed enough to hang, I'll take him off your hands." Evelyn felt her stomach twist. "He's still fevered. He can't even walk." Boone's eyes softened slightly, though his tone stayed hard. "You've got a kind heart, miss. But don't let it blind you. I've seen men like Callahan before. They'll make you think they're worth saving right up until they slit your throat." She didn't flinch. "He's not that man anymore." Boone gave her a long, measuring look. "Then I reckon time will tell." When he left, the clinic felt colder. The law had come, and with it, the slow ticking of a clock running out. Inside the patient room, Reed was awake, his face pale but his eyes alert. Evelyn brought him water, forcing a small smile. "Marshal Boone's here," she said softly. He gave a dry laugh. "Figures. Man, don't waste time. He says he'll take you once you're strong enough." "Then maybe I ought to stay weak," he muttered, wincing as he shifted. "Ain't the first time the law's waited for me to die before hanging me." Evelyn's voice faltered. "I told him you've changed, that you're not what they say." He turned his head, studying her as if trying to decide whether to be grateful or furious. "You shouldn't have said that. Makes you a liar or a fool." "Then call me both," she said, meeting his gaze. "I don't care what the town thinks. I know what I've seen." Reed looked away, the ghost of something pained flickering in his eyes. "You don't owe me belief, Miss Graves." "It's Evelyn," she corrected quietly. "And I don't believe in you for your sake. I do it because I believe in what mercy can do." He didn't answer, but his hand tightened slightly around the locket on his chest. Later that night, Dr. Graves found her rewrapping Reed's bandages. He stood in the doorway, the lamplight casting his face in sharp lines. "Evelyn, step away from him," he said. She froze. "Father, No, enough." His tone cut like a scalpel. "You've done your duty as a nurse. The man's alive, and that's where our obligation ends. You will not interfere further." Evelyn straightened, defiance rising like wildfire in her chest. "If I stop helping him, he'll die." "Then he dies as he lived. A criminal." Her voice trembled, but her eyes didn't waver. "No, Father. He dies because we stop believing a man can change." Dr. Graves stepped forward, lowering his voice. "You are my daughter, and I love you. But compassion without judgment is ruin. Let him face what's coming." When he left, the clinic fell silent except for Reed's labored breathing. Evelyn sat in the chair beside him, staring at the shadows stretching across the floor. She thought of the marshal's cold warning, her father's weary logic, and the outlaw's broken promise. And she knew deep in her bones that she couldn't walk away. So when dawn painted the windows pale gold, she did the one thing no doctor's daughter should. She began to lie, to her father, about Reed's condition. "The fever's back, he can't move yet." To the marshal, when he stopped by, "The wound's not healing right. Another few days, maybe a week." And to herself, when her hands lingered too long on the outlaw's skin and her heart beat too fast for mercy alone. Each lie bought Reed time. Each lie pulled her deeper into a truth she could no longer deny. Night had settled softly over Hollow Creek, its hush broken only by the wind brushing through the cottonwoods behind the clinic. Inside, lamplight burned low. Reed Callahan sat propped against a pillow, pale but no longer fragile. The fever had broken 2 days ago. He was healing, faster than Evelyn dared admit to anyone. But the secret weighed heavily between them. Every time she changed his bandages, every time she met those storm-gray eyes, she wondered if mercy had turned into something else. He noticed her silence that evening. "You're quiet tonight," he said. "I'm thinking." "About what?" "That you shouldn't be here." She glanced at him, half smiling. "You should be long gone, somewhere safe." He gave a low chuckle. "Safe's a funny word for a man like me." His gaze drifted to the small window where snow fell faintly against the glass. "Truth is, I don't reckon I deserve safe." "Maybe not," she said. "But you deserve a chance." He studied her for a long moment, then reached for the locket that never left his chest. His fingers turned it slowly as though the motion itself steadied him. "You asked once who she was," he said quietly. "The woman in the picture," Evelyn nodded. "Your sister, Annie." He took a slow breath. "She was 14 when I left. Our folks were gone, no land, no home. I joined a crew, figured I'd earn enough to come back for her. Thought I could keep my hands clean while they got dirty." He gave a bitter laugh. "Turns out sin doesn't care whose hand holds the gun." Evelyn listened, still as stone. "They used her, Evelyn," he went on. "When the law caught wind of our train job, the boys turned on me, shot me, left me for dead. But they took her. Said if I ever talked, they'd make sure she vanished for good." Silence fell, broken only by the soft ticking of the clock. Evelyn's heart clenched. "That's why you can't die," she whispered. "You have to find her." He shook his head slowly. "Ain't that simple. Marshall Boone's out there waiting to drag me back in irons. If I run, he'll hunt me down before I find her. If I stay, she's lost." She leaned closer, her voice fierce with conviction. "Then live. Live long enough to make it right. Don't fight to flee, fight to save her." He looked at her then, really looked. The lamplight softened her face, but her eyes burned bright with something fierce and steady. "I've done a lot of wrong," he said quietly. "But maybe I could do one thing right." Evelyn smiled faintly. "Then start by living." He hesitated, then nodded. "All right, Evelyn Graves. You've got yourself a promise." That night she found herself sitting at his bedside long after she should have gone to sleep. He drifted in and out of slumber, and once, in a half-dreaming murmur, he said, "If I live through this, I'll never lift a gun again." The words settled in her heart like a vow, but dawn brought more than light. It brought danger. Dr. Graves, sharp-eyed and weary, noticed the color back in Reed's face and the steadiness of his hands. "Over breakfast," he said quietly. "His pulse is strong, his fever gone. You've been lying to me, haven't you?" Evelyn froze, her spoon halfway to her mouth. "Father," he cut her off. "You think I wouldn't notice? You're hiding how fast he's healing." "Why?" Her voice came small but certain. "Because if Marshall Boone takes him now, he'll hang before he can make things right." Her father's eyes hardened. "You're letting your heart cloud your judgment." "Maybe," she said. "But isn't that what makes us human?" Dr. Graves sighed, the years in his face deepening. "You're playing with fire, Evelyn. Mercy's one thing. Defiance is another." That evening, when she returned to Reed's room, he sensed the storm in her. "What happened?" he asked. "My father knows." Reed's expression darkened. "Then I need to go." "You can't," she whispered. "You're not strong enough. I don't have a choice." "Yes, you do," she said fiercely. "Stay. Heal. Then go save your sister, but not before you're ready." He hesitated, torn between the outlaw's instinct to run and the man's newfound will to endure. Finally, he nodded. "You've got a way of making a man listen, Evelyn." "Then listen to this," she said softly. "You're not dying in my father's clinic." "Not while I still have breath," he smiled, weary and sincere. "Then I reckon I'll live just to keep that promise." Outside, the snow had stopped, but the air felt charged, as if the world itself held its breath. Neither of them knew that beyond the hills, riders were already gathering. The same men who had left Reed to die were coming back to finish the job, and before long the fire they carried would burn more than just memory. The night they came back was quiet at first, too quiet. Even the coyotes had gone still. Evelyn was reading by lamplight in the clinic's front room, her eyes heavy with exhaustion, when the horses thundered down Main Street. A shout split the cold, followed by gunfire. The glass shattered before she could scream. "Down!" Dr. Graves bellowed, throwing himself over her as a bullet tore through the wall behind them. Smoke and dust filled the air. The sound of galloping hooves circled the clinic, the voices outside cruel and familiar. "Burn it," one man hollered. "Let's see if the good doctor saves his sainted patient now." Evelyn's heart froze. She knew those voices. Reed had whispered their names once in a fever. Larson, Pike, Harlow. The gang that left him bleeding on the tracks. Dr. Graves gripped her shoulders. "Get to the cellar, now." "But Father, no argument, go." She stumbled toward the hallway, but before she could reach the trap door, she saw Reed in the open doorway of his room. Weak, pale, but standing. A bandage wrapped his ribs, and in his trembling hand glinted a pistol. "Stay back," she cried. "You're not ready. I ain't letting them hurt you," he rasped. The firelight outside flared orange against the window. Then came the smell, kerosene. They'd set the place ablaze. Flames leapt along the walls, crawling toward the ceiling beams. Reed staggered forward, pulling Evelyn behind a desk as bullets tore through the front door. He fired once, just once, and a cry echoed from outside. "Callahan's alive," someone shouted. "Finish it!" Dr. Graves ran to the storeroom, hauling a bucket of water, but the fire was faster. The ceiling began to creak and spit embers. "Father, we have to get out," Evelyn shouted. He turned toward her, and in that moment a gunshot split the air. Dr. Graves staggered, the bucket crashing from his hands. Evelyn screamed, rushing to catch him as he fell. The bullet had grazed his shoulder, but the sight of blood ripped through her like lightning. Reed limped forward through the smoke, firing again toward the door. He caught one of the attackers in the leg, sending the other scattering. Then he turned back to Evelyn, coughing hard, his voice hoarse. "Get him out." "I'll hold him." "No." "You'll die if you stay." "Better me than you," he said, and before she could protest, he threw himself toward the doorway, using what little strength he had left. The gunfire outside roared again. Evelyn half dragged, half carried her father toward the back, the air thick with smoke. She could hear Reed shouting, hoarse, defiant, as the men closed in. Then came a sound like thunder, and the whole front of the clinic seemed to explode in sparks and flame. She thought it was over. She thought he was gone. But when Marshal Boone and his deputies arrived moments later, drawn by the fire, they found Reed Callahan on his knees in the snow outside, half conscious, clutching his pistol like a prayer. One of the gang lay dead beside him. The rest had fled into the night. "Drop it, Callahan!" Boone shouted, leveling his rifle. Reed blinked through the smoke, his breath ragged. "They were going to kill him," he croaked. "Drop the gun." The outlaw's strength gave out. The pistol slipped from his grasp, sinking into the snow. Boone stepped forward, cuffing him without another word. Evelyn burst from the doorway, coughing, her face streaked with ash. "Please, he saved us," she cried. "He's not one of them. He stopped them." Boone's expression softened for just a moment, then hardened again. "He's still a wanted man, Miss Graves. He'll stand trial." They lifted Reed into the wagon, his head lolling to one side. Blood seeped through his bandages, and Evelyn's hands trembled as she tried to stop it. Dr. Graves, pale but standing, laid a hand on her shoulder. "He did right tonight," he said softly. "But right doesn't erase what came before." As the wagon rolled away toward the jailhouse, flames devoured the remains of the clinic behind them. Evelyn watched until the glow faded to embers. Somewhere in the distance a nightbird cried, a sound so lonely it seemed to echo her heart. Reed had lived. Barely. But now he was a prisoner, bound for a noose instead of a second chance. And she knew that saving him once more would take something stronger than medicine. It would take faith and love, willing to defy the law itself. Hollow. Creek smelled of smoke for days after the fire. The once white clinic stood blackened, its windows blown out, its walls half collapsed. Evelyn spent every waking hour tending to what patients they could still shelter in the back storeroom. Her father's arm bound tight and healing slowly, but her thoughts, always, were of Reed. He lay locked in the small stone jail behind the marshal's office, guarded day and night. The townsfolk passed by, muttering about justice. Some said the fire had been God's punishment for harboring sin. Others whispered that Dr. Graves's daughter had fallen under a criminal spell, and maybe, Evelyn thought, they were right because every time she closed her eyes, she saw Reed standing in the smoke, shielding her with his broken body. On the third morning, Marshal Boone came to the clinic. He removed his hat at the door, his face grave. "Miss Graves," he said, "figured you ought to know. The judge's circuit will reach Hollow Creek in 3 days. Callahan's trial will be short." "Sentence shorter?" Evelyn froze, her hands stilling over a tray of instruments. "You mean to hang him?" Boone nodded. "Man's got a list of crimes longer than the main street. He robbed a federal train, shot 2 deputies in Missouri." "He didn't kill those men," she said quickly. "He told me." The marshal's eyes softened, but his tone stayed even. "You believe him. That counts for something. But the law ain't built on belief," her voice trembled. "Then the law's blind to change." Boone sighed, setting his hat back on his head. "Change doesn't come easy, Miss Graves. Not for men like him." When he left, the world seemed quieter and colder. That night, Evelyn sat at her small desk, staring at the burned ruins beyond the window. Her father's voice broke the silence behind her. "You went to see him, didn't you?" She turned. He stood in the doorway, pale but steady. "Yes," she said. "He deserves to know someone still believes in him. Evelyn." His voice carried more sorrow than anger. "You're risking everything. Your reputation, this practice, our family name." Her chin lifted. "Then let them talk. I won't stand by while a man dies for trying to do right." He came closer, the lamplight trembling on his face. "Do you love him?" The question hung like smoke between them. "I don't know what to call it," she whispered. "But I know I can't let him die." Her father sighed, sitting heavily in the chair across from her. "When your mother died, I swore I'd keep you from pain. I thought that meant keeping you from danger. But maybe I've kept you from faith." Evelyn reached across the desk, gripping his hand. "Then have faith now. Help me." He stared at her for a long time, the old doctor wrestling with the father inside him. Finally he said, "You can't fight the law." "No," she said quietly, "but I can outsmart it." By the next evening, a plan had taken shape. She waited until the town slept, until the clock tower struck 2. Then she slipped from the house, cloak drawn tight against the cold. The moon hung pale over the jailhouse. Inside, Marshal Boone sat asleep in his chair, boots up on the desk. The keys dangled from his belt, glinting faintly in the light of the dying fire. Evelyn's hands trembled as she crept past him, heart hammering. She reached the cell. Reed sat on the cot, his head bowed, eyes shadowed. When he saw her, disbelief flickered across his face. "Evelyn, what are you doing here?" "Saving you," she whispered. He shook his head slowly. "No, if you do this, they'll come after you." "I don't care," she said, her voice breaking. "You have to find your sister. You promised her." He stared at her, torn between hope and despair. "You'll ruin yourself." "Then let me be ruined for something that matters." She slipped the key into the lock. It clicked softly. When the door swung open, he stepped close, too close, and for a moment neither spoke. The air between them felt charged with everything they hadn't said. "Evelyn," he murmured, "I ain't ever had someone believe in me like this." "Then don't waste it," she said, pressing a small folded paper into his palm. "Directions. There's an old shack by Miller's Ridge. You'll find supplies there. Go before sunrise." His fingers brushed hers, rough and warm. "I'll come back," he said quietly. "I swear it," she nodded, eyes glistening. "You'd better. I'm not done patching you up." He smiled faintly, then slipped into the shadows. When Marshal Boone awoke at dawn to find the cell empty and the lock unbroken, all he found was a note lying on the cot. Written in a steady, delicate hand were 6 words. He lived because love demanded it. The dawn broke over Hollow Creek in pale gold and blood. Frost gleamed on the grass outside the jailhouse, and the echo of hooves faded east toward the ridges. Marshal Boone found the empty cell and the note before the sun had fully risen. By mid-morning, half the town was talking. By noon, Boone was saddled and ready to ride. But even as he followed the trail, Evelyn was already miles ahead in her heart, if not in distance, praying that Reed would reach his sister before the law reached him. Reed rode hard despite the pain burning in his ribs, every breath cut like a blade. But the thought of Annie, her smile, her laugh, her small hands clutching his coat when they were children, pulled him onward. The directions Evelyn had given led him through the foothills to an abandoned mining shack near Miller's Ridge. Smoke rose from the chimney when he arrived. Someone was inside. He slipped from the horse, hand trembling on his gun, not from fear but from memory. Annie, he whispered through the open door. A small gasp answered him. Then a woman stepped from the shadows, older now, her hair darker, eyes wide with disbelief. Reed? He swallowed hard, his voice breaking. It's me, darlin'. I came back. For a heartbeat, neither moved. Then she was in his arms, sobbing against his chest. I thought you were dead, she cried. They said you... They lied, he said softly. But I'm here now. Her tears stained the dust on his shirt. Behind her, tied to a chair, was a man. Larson, the same one who'd left him bleeding by the tracks. Found him sniffing around, Annie said fiercely. Said he'd finish what he started. Reed's jaw tightened. He stepped toward the man, who smirked through split lips. Well, look who crawled back from the grave, Larson spat. Should have stayed in the dirt, Callahan. Law's coming for you, and when they hang you, I'll laugh. Reed stared at him for a long moment, long enough for every memory, every sin to pass like ghosts behind his eyes. Then he holstered the gun. No, he said quietly. I'm done killin', Larson sneered. Soft now, are you? Reed turned away. Maybe. But I'd rather be soft than damned. He untied the ropes holding Larson, then shoved him toward the door. Get out. Tell the marshal where to find me. Larson blinked in disbelief, then staggered outside, clutching his side. Annie stared. Reed, why would you? Because I made a promise, he said. And I ain't breaking it again. He looked at her, his eyes full of quiet resolve. When the law comes, I'll face it. But you stay safe. Evelyn'll help you when you reach town. Evelyn, the doctor's daughter, he said with a faint smile. An angel who doesn't know how to give up on the likes of me. Annie touched his hand, tears glistening. She must love you. Maybe, he said softly. But love like hers doesn't belong to one man. It saves what's left of all of us. By the time Marshal Boone arrived, the sun hung low and red. Smoke curled from the chimney, and Reed stood waiting outside. Gun belt laid on the ground beside him. Boone dismounted slowly. Heard you let one of your own walk free, he said. Reed nodded. He'll lead you to the rest. They're still out there. You know I gotta take you in. I know. Boone studied him for a long moment. The outlaw who didn't run. The man who stood like he'd already made peace with the rope. You could have fled, Boone said. Why stay? Reed looked toward the hills where Annie's figure rode away under the bleeding sky. Had a promise to keep. When Boone raised his rifle, the sound of hooves came fast from behind, the sharp rhythm of one horse. Evelyn rode into view, cloak flying, hair unbound. Stop, she cried. Boone turned as she dismounted, running to Reed's side. He saved his sister, Marshall. He turned himself in. You can't hang a man who's redeemed himself. Boone's jaw tightened. The law doesn't measure redemption, Miss Graves. Then maybe it should, she said fiercely. For a long moment, no one spoke. The sun dipped lower. Finally, Boone lowered the rifle. You want to repay a debt, Callahan? He said gruffly. Ride with me. Lead me to the rest of your gang. You help bring them in. Maybe the judge finds mercy. Reed's eyes flickered with something like disbelief, then gratitude. You'd do that? Don't make me regret it, Boone said. Reed nodded. You have my word. Evelyn's eyes met his, shining. And when it's done? He smiled faintly. Then I reckon I'll come home. Boone mounted his horse. Reed followed, the wind tugging at his coat. As they rode out, Evelyn watched until they disappeared into the dust. Her heart ached, but beneath the ache was pride, steady, quiet, and sure. Reed Callahan was no longer the man who'd crawled half-dead to her doorstep. He was the man who'd lived to keep his promise. Spring came slowly to Hollow Creek that year. After a winter of silence and snow, the valley began to breathe again. The cottonwoods leafed out along the creek, and the clinic window stood open for the first time in months. Inside, the smell of antiseptic and wild sage filled the air. Dr. Graves, spectacles perched low on his nose, was bandaging a ranch hand's arm when the door creaked open. Someone's back, the nurse whispered from the hallway. The doctor looked up, and his hand stilled. Framed in the doorway stood Reed Callahan. His shoulders were still broad, but the hard edge in his stance was gone. His hat was pressed respectfully against his chest. The sun behind him cast his figure in gold. Morning, Doc, Reed said quietly. For a long moment the old man just stared. Then he sighed, not in anger, but in the kind of weary surrender that comes when judgment's been replaced by understanding. You're late, Dr. Graves said at last. Reed smiled faintly. Marshal Boone saw to that. He made sure I kept my promise and faced every ghost I left behind. The doctor nodded slowly. And the others? Gone, Reed said. The gang's finished. Boone saw to that too. He hesitated, his gaze dropping. I ain't here looking for forgiveness, sir. Just work, maybe a chance to do right by the livin'. Graves studied him for a long moment, then looked toward the back room. You'll find Evelyn there. She's the one who decides who gets a second chance in this clinic. Evelyn was bent over a table of herbs and tinctures when she heard his voice. Still saving fools who don't deserve it? She turned and the breath caught in her throat. He looked different, older, steadier. The wildness in his eyes had been replaced by something she hadn't seen before. Peace. You came back, she whispered. Told you I would. She smiled through sudden tears. You nearly didn't. Nearly's been most of my life, he said softly. Figure it's time I start living the rest of it right. She stepped closer, her hands trembling slightly. Boone said you helped bring them in, that you saved his life in the canyon. Reed shrugged. Wasn't hero work, just paying back what's owed. Her eyes lingered on the faint scar near his temple, the healed mark of his last fight. And now? Now I'd like to learn something useful, he said. Doc mentioned you could use another hand. Evelyn smiled. I could use one that's steady. He looked down at his palm. The same one that had once drawn a gun, now meant for holding a scalpel or guiding a horse's reins. Guess I can learn steady, he murmured. They stood in silence for a moment, the spring breeze slipping through the open window, carrying the scent of earth and new rain. Weeks passed. Reed worked dawn to dusk, mending fences for the nearby ranchers, hauling supplies for the clinic, cleaning instruments when the doctor was too tired to see straight. He never asked for thanks, never spoke of what came before, but the townsfolk began to notice. The outlaw who'd once brought fear to the valley now brought medicine, food, and quiet kindness. One evening, as the sun dipped low over the ridgeline, Evelyn found him outside the clinic. Splitting wood, you know, she said softly. The children call you the quiet man with the scar. They say you saved the doctor's daughter. He chuckled low. Stories get bigger than the truth. Maybe, she said. But sometimes that's how the truth survives. He leaned the axe against the post and looked at her. Really looked. You saved me, Evelyn. Not the other way around, she shook her head. No, Reed, you chose to live. That's what saved you. For a moment they stood beneath the evening light, the world hushed around them. He reached into his coat and drew out the locket, the one she'd cleaned of blood so long ago. It glimmered softly in his palm. Inside was the same picture of his sister, but on the back another engraving had been added, for the ones who believed. He pressed it into Evelyn's hand. You belong to that promise too. She closed her fingers over it. Then it's safe with me. That night, as lanterns flickered in the clinic and the last of the day's dust settled outside, Reed sat on the porch steps, watching the stars crawl out over the dark horizon. He thought of the man he used to be, the outlaw dying in the dirt, the one who'd thought love was something you stole or lost. Now, he knew better. Love wasn't about possession. It was endurance. It was mercy. It was the steady hand that refused to let you die when the world said you should. Inside, Evelyn's laughter drifted through the open window. Dr. Graves scolded her about something small, and Reed smiled to himself. He'd lived to keep his promise, and somehow in keeping it, he'd found another worth making, one that whispered of home, healing, and a life finally his own. If you felt Reed and Evelyn's story touch your heart, don't forget to like this video, subscribe for more tales of love and redemption from the Wild West, and share it with someone who still believes in second chances. Until next time, partner, ride safe.